Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Coyotes, in which the Sharks lost 4-3 in a shootout. This is now the second straight game in which the Sharks have left a point on the table against a team that, the Sharks were expected to beat. They played against the Kings yesterday, they play against the Coyotes tonight, and those two teams are some of the worst in the league. They're the two bottom teams in the Pacific Division, and so the Sharks leaving 2 points on the table, as I said, was a bit of a disappointing result. They did play a bit better tonight against the Coyotes than they did against the Kings, but still, it wasn't good enough to actually get the 2 points here tonight. Scoring for the Coyotes, it was Galchenyuk twice. He got a couple of nice, not breaks, but a couple of nice, very good opportunities. Dell really had no chance on either of them. And then it was Connor Garland who got his second of the year. Tim Heed scored on the power play for the Sharks. That was actually the first goal of the game. The Sharks held a 1-0 lead at this point, or at a point. And then Tomas Hertl got a couple in the third period. That tied the game at some point 2-2, and then tied the game again rather later on, I think 6 or so minutes to go in the third period, 3-3. As I said, the Sharks played a bit better, but in the first couple of periods, it still wasn't very impressive. I thought they looked a bit slow. It was, again, as I said, still better than how they started off against the Kings, but still not too impressive, especially against such a low-ranked team in the league. In the third period, I thought the Sharks were a much better team. I thought they looked quite strong after they juggled the lineup a bit. As I said, they did get the 2 goals from Tomas Hertl. They put up a lot of shots. It would not have surprised me if they got even more than 2 goals in this period. Kemper had to be quite solid. Sharks, I believe, also hit a post from Vlasic, if I'm not mistaken. And they move into the overtime. And again, the Sharks just couldn't do much in the overtime. They didn't get much generated 3-on-3 besides a Vlasic breakaway that ends up being saved. The Sharks then got a power play in the overtime. Still couldn't get one past Kemper. 4-on-4, still nothing doing. And then the shootout came along and the Sharks lost once again. First thing I'd like to talk about is Aaron Dell. He is obviously playing in this game tonight as Jones played the previous day against the Los Angeles Kings. I thought Dell was okay in this game. He really didn't have much of a chance at all on any of the Coyotes' goals. The Galchenyuk first one and the Connor Garland first one, I guess, only one, were both on breakaways, or at least partial breakaways. Very nice moves from both players, so I don't blame Dell on either of them. Galchenyuk's second one came on a 5-on-3, and so he really didn't have much of a chance on that one either. The only criticism you could levy towards Dell, and it's been something that has been an issue for him so far this season, is his rebound control. Obviously, the main one that comes to mind is when Stepan, shorthanded, flips this puck in onto Aaron Dell. He's unable to control this rebound. Allows Stepan to burst through the defense, forces LeBanc to hook him up, which causes them to take that penalty, eventually puts the Sharks down 5-on-3, which allows them to score this goal. And so a bit of a misplay from Aaron Dell, but still, as I said about Jones yesterday, not necessarily the reason that they lost this game. Next is the shootouts and, of course, the overtime. As I said, the overtime once again could not find much flow to it. The 3-on-3 still seems to be an issue for the San Jose Sharks. As I said, besides the Vlasic breakaway, they didn't get too much generated. The power play wasn't really there. The 4-on-4 wasn't really there. But it was really mainly the shootout that I want to talk about. This is the Sharks' third shootout this season. They had already been 0-for-6 in terms of shooters, and they gave up a goal in each of the first 2 of those shootouts. Then they come again tonight, go again 0-for-3, give up a goal to Alex Galchenyuk, and they lose in the shootout. And it's not even that the Sharks don't have good shooters. I mean, Logan Couture and Joe Pavelski have historically been quite good in the shootouts, but they just haven't been able to get it. It's a bit of luck, as obviously the shootout isn't sort of termed as a coin flip. It can go either way, but still, if the Sharks continue to find themselves on the other side of that coin flip, right now they've got 7 overtime losses in the league. That's tied for the most in the entire league. That puts them on pace for about 14 on the season. That's 14 points left behind. Just to put that in perspective, the Sharks right now sit second place in the Pacific Division somewhat comfortably. Yeah, the Ducks and the Knights are close, but it doesn't seem like they're too close to falling outside of the playoffs. If I'm not mistaken, I think they're 6 points out of that spot. But you take a look at the Los Angeles Kings, a team that many people are counting out at this point. They're the last place team in the league. There's a 14-point difference between these two teams. Imagine if the San Jose Sharks by the end of the season, 14 overtime losses. If they have those 14 points, that's the difference between first place in the Pacific Division and maybe just missing the playoffs entirely. So it's a bit of a disappointment that they're leaving so many points on the table so far this season. A lot of people, when they come into these kinds of games, they say, oh, at least we claimed the point. But those times where you say, at least we claimed the point, they start to add up to the point where at the end of the season, you're looking back at it and you're looking at the standings and you're saying, if the Sharks won just 5-6 more overtimes, that's a division title. But instead, they sit, let's say, third place or even first wild card. Next is Burns and Vlasic. These were the two defensemen for the San Jose Sharks who I was looking to step up in this game in the absence of Erik Karlsson. Obviously, he had been suspended for 2 games. He won't play tonight. He won't play the game after the Christmas break. And starting with Burns, I thought Burns was actually very, very good in this game. And it's rare to say that about Brent Burns on a night that he doesn't actually register a point. He didn't get a goal. He didn't get an assist. But I thought he was very good defensively. He played about 30 minutes in this game, so he was given a huge role to play. And I thought he made a lot of very nice plays defensively. I thought he was okay as well offensively. And so Brent Burns, who has been struggling a bit in the past couple of games, definitely steps up in the absence of Karlsson, who has certainly been their best defenseman in the past, I guess, dozen games. Vlasic, on the other hand, was a bit more interesting. I actually thought Vlasic played a pretty okay game, of course, besides the 2 major misplays, which end up in the back of the Sharks' net. So a bit unlucky for Vlasic, but it seems to just be what's been happening this entire season so far for him. He gets caught too far up in the neutral zone on Galchenyuk's one after Jonas Donskoy has a bad giveaway. This allows Galchenyuk to come in with 2-on-1 and that's alone on the breakaway or partial breakaway, puts it past Arundel. He then makes an actual good play without taking a penalty against Clayton Keller to stop him on the breakaway. And then maybe 10-15 seconds later, he then gets caught again. Garland finds himself behind Vlasic on another breakaway. That time, he's able to score. And so Vlasic, he made a lot of nice defensive plays in this game, but the 2 major issues that stood out that ended up in the back of his net definitely begs to question what's going on with Marc-Edouard Vlasic this season. He's on the first year of a big contract, $7 million for 8 years, and you really have to hope at this point, and it's weird to say this, but you have to hope at this point that the reason Vlasic isn't performing well is that there's just a bit of a lack of effort in his game, because if the real reason is that he has lost a step in the first year of such a massive contract, then you could be in for a real tough next close to decade with Marc-Edouard Vlasic having lost a step and being a bit of a defensive liability. So if I'm a Sharks fan, which I am of course, I'm hoping that actually it's Vlasic whose compete level maybe isn't there, and hopefully this Christmas break will do him some good and he can come back and be the Marc-Edouard Vlasic that we know he can be. Next is the lines. They were jumbled up a bit. Of course, this game come in the third period. They had been jumbled a bit at the end of the Kings game last game after the Sharks didn't get much generated, but they were turned back to normal, turned back to what they have been in the past few ones at the start of this one. And again, the Sharks still didn't get much generated. So come third period, DeBoer decides to once again change them up, and it really did work. Radil was returned to the first line with Meyer and Couture. It was Pavelski who was reunited with Thornton as well as Sorensen. Hurdle was made to center Evander Kane as well as LeBanc, although Donskoy got a shift there, and then Donskoy was pushed to the fourth line, and that ended up working. Hurdle's line looked quite good as he scored 2 goals. I thought Pavelski, Thornton, and Sorensen looked pretty good together as well, and so it does beg the question, while they came into this one and they decided to go back to normal, after Christmas, do they actually decide to make a change to the lineup? I said Jonas Donskoy might be the odd one out to find himself down to the fourth line if anything were to happen. And in this game, while Jonas Donskoy started on the second line with Pavelski and Kane, he played the least amount of minutes on the team. So it would not be a surprise to find himself, let's say, on the fourth line, or maybe even a healthy scratch, as the Sharks called up Rook Chartier from the AHL, I believe, this morning. Next, just a few players I want to mention. I thought Timo Meier had a pretty solid game. The puck seemed to be following him around a bit. He did squander that 2-on-1 with Joe Thornton by passing it back to Pavelski, who was shadowed by about 3 Coyotes on the back check. So a bit of a misplay there, but otherwise I thought he got some nice chances. Joe Thornton, he got an assist in this game on the Tim Heed goal, which passed Marcel Dion for 10th place all-time in assists. So congratulations to him. He also had a very solid game to go with that. Tim Heed, who I guess I should mention at this point, he was coming in, first time playing a game in probably about a month or so because of the Erik Karlsson injury, and Heed actually looked quite good. He got the goal, of course, but also was solid-ish defensively. I thought he had some okay chances offensively, and I'm not really the biggest Tim Heed fan, as some people might know, and yet I was relatively impressed. Will this be enough to, let's say, kick Shemek out of the lineup if Karlsson returns from suspension? I doubt it, unless Shemek has like another bad game against the Ducks or something, because I thought Shemek was okay tonight. Unless Shemek has a bad game against the Ducks and Heed has a great game against the Ducks, I would assume Heed will return to being a healthy scratch once Erik Karlsson returns to the lineup, but it was still a good message to De Boer that he's ready to play if called upon. And just to mention, I'm not surprised that he comes into the lineup over Joakim Ryan. I don't think it really says much about it, just because of the fact that it was Karlsson, an offensive defenseman who was injured. It allows an offensive defenseman like Tim Heed to come in. Let's say if it was Braun injured, I would not have been surprised if Ryan stepped in. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action after the Christmas break on Thursday against the Anaheim Ducks. These past couple of games have been Pacific Division games, but they haven't been as much importance because giving, let's say 2 points to the Coyotes, 2 points to the Kings doesn't really matter too much at the moment. But this game against the Anaheim Ducks, this is a 4-point game. This is a very key 4-point game for the Sharks. If they can win with the Ducks and the Knights somewhat struggling, but especially the Flames as well somewhat struggling in the past few games, the Sharks can continue to solidify themselves in the Pacific Division. If they drop that game, especially in regulation, they're right back to where they even started before the 5-game winning streak that they went on. Class dismissed.